The fire contract. A contract is meant to be watertight. It defines boundaries, secures assets, and dictates behavior. But what happens when a contract, signed in cold ink to solve a CEO's most intimate problem, is breached not by failure, but by a force more reckless than any corporate scandal? Passion? In the rigid, colorless world of the South Korean elite, wealthy CEO Lee Jun-ho was trapped. His vast fortune couldn't buy him the one thing he needed: peace for his motherless 1-year-old daughter. Ji-eun, who recoiled from everyone except one person, he found Aisha Diallo, a vibrant, independent black teacher. A woman who brought color and life into his gray world. Desperate, he offered her an indecent proposal, a marriage based on legal terms, not love. He offered security. She sought freedom. They both agreed to the rules. They agreed to the contract. They never accounted for the fire. Jun-ho sat perfectly still behind the colossal desk of polished, dark mahogany. The air in his high-rise office was cold, dry, and silent, a reflection of his own meticulously controlled existence. His custom-tailored suit felt like armor, necessary protection against the world, and against the uncomfortable anxiety coiling in his gut. He was Lee Jun-ho, a man who commanded respect and solved problems with cold, logical precision. But the problem of his daughter, Ji-eun, was defying every solution money could buy. A soft knock preceded Aisha Diallo's entry. She was a startling anomaly in this world of muted colors. Her dress, a vibrant spring leaf green, seemed to absorb the muted light and glow. Her hair was styled in neat braids, pulled back to reveal a face of striking, intelligent beauty. She possessed a warmth, a life, that felt utterly foreign in his sterile environment. Jun-ho found his thoughts momentarily derailed, remembering a fleeting, inappropriate celebrity comparison. He ruthlessly suppressed it. This was business. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Diallo," Jun-ho began, his voice a low, measured baritone that betrayed none of his internal turmoil. He gestured to the 2 untouched cups of herbal tea. "I appreciate you leaving your work." Aisha settled onto the sleek, uncomfortable chair. She offered a small, polite smile, though her posture was subtly coiled. "It's no trouble, Mr. Lee. I'm anxious about Ji-eun. Is everything all right with her?" Her voice, soft and melodic, carried the slight lilt of an accent he found himself registering with unnerving clarity. Jun-ho took a slow, deliberate breath. He picked up the slim, leather-bound portfolio. "Ji-eun is the reason you are here." He opened the portfolio, revealing the document within, and pushed it across the vast desk. The paper was pristine white, the contrast stark against the dark wood. "As you know, my daughter has not recovered from the departure of her mother. She is in distress. She rejects all comfort, all caregivers, except you." Aisha's brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "She's a wonderful child, Mr. Lee. She just needs consistent warmth. She's missed it. Consistent warmth. Yes, I require that for her, permanently." Jun-ho's gaze was unwavering, his eyes dark with a desperation he had masked as authority. "I am proposing marriage, Ms. Diallo, a contractual marriage." The word struck Aisha with a cold, shocking finality. Marriage? To him? The absurdity of the transaction stole her breath. She had expected to discuss Ji-eun's feeding schedule, not her own future. I beg your pardon?" Her voice was barely a whisper of incredulity. "Are you serious?" "Completely." Jun-ho leaned forward slightly, his movement almost predatory. "It would be mutually beneficial. For Ji-eun it is stability. For you it is security. Financial security, a respected social position, and freedom from whatever obligations or pressures are drawing you away from Seoul." Aisha froze. How could he know? Her family's constant, wearying calls about her duty, her financial obligation to her younger cousins, her need to find stability back home. The thought was chilling. This man hadn't just studied his daughter. He had studied her situation. Her anger flared, hot and immediate, battling the profound, cold shock. She gripped the arms of the chair until her knuckles were white. "Mr. Lee," she said, her voice regaining a painful steeliness, "do you truly believe a child's heart can be bought with a contract?" "I am not buying a heart, Ms. Diallo. I am buying a solution for a child I cannot save by myself." He met her fierce gaze. "And I am offering you the chance to be that solution. With a financial settlement, that would secure the future of your entire family and guarantee your independence in this country. He watched her carefully, knowing he had offered her an escape hatch from a debt she was too proud to mention. Aisha sat in a small, cozy cafe hours later, nursing a lukewarm herbal tea. The crisp document lay beside her phone, the cold reality of the proposal forcing an internal war. She hadn't slept, pacing her tiny studio apartment all night. She pulled her phone toward her, the screen lighting up with a fresh wave of messages. The latest was a voice note from her mother, a tired lament about the money needed for her aging grandmother's medicine, followed by a gentle, crushing plea for Aisha to come home and marry well. Aisha felt the weight of her generational debt, the profound responsibility to her family that overshadowed her own dreams. The thought of having to abandon her career, her life, and her dream of opening her own bilingual nursery was suffocating. She traced the outline of the contract. Freedom. The money would solve the immediate, crushing financial pressure, allowing her to send home funds without relinquishing her autonomy. This was her shield. The contract is a golden cage, she thought bitterly. But it's a cage I can live in on my own terms. She stepped out of the cafe, the cool autumn air hitting her face, and found herself drifting toward the nursery. She stood outside the low iron fence, watching the courtyard. There was Ji-eun. The little girl sat alone, pushing a wooden block. When a kind Korean teacher knelt to encourage her, Ji-eun immediately recoiled, tears welling up, her small body stiff with distrust. Then, Ji-eun saw Aisha. The transformation was immediate and absolute. The tears dried, replaced by a radiant, unreserved joy. Ji-eun's tiny hands shot out between the bars of the fence. Her mouth opened in a silent, happy cry. "Teacher Aisha!" The raw, unguarded need in that child's face pierced through Aisha's armor of resentment. Her heart melted. He may be buying a solution, but I would be earning a purpose. How could she turn her back on this profound, unique connection? The cultural kinship, the instinctive trust. It was undeniable. She couldn't deny Ji-eun. Later that evening, Junho's phone vibrated. He snatched it up, his breath catching when he saw her name. Mr. Lee. Aisha's voice was clear, composed, and notably firmer than the day before. Ms. Diallo. He returned instantly to his CEO persona. "I have reached a decision," Aisha stated. "I am accepting, but let me be perfectly clear. I am not accepting your money for my personal comfort. I am accepting this to secure my independence, and because I am uniquely suited to be Ji-eun's mother." Junho leaned back, a flicker of something, respect, touching his eyes. "What are your terms, Ms. Diallo?" 1. I maintain my employment at the nursery until the school year ends. 2. There will be no sexual intimacy. This is a business partnership for the child, nothing more. 3. My cultural practices, my food, my community, the language I speak, will be respected and incorporated into Ji-eun's life. She delivered the final test. 4. Any public statement regarding the dissolution of this marriage will be entirely joint. You will not malign my character to protect your family's reputation. I will walk away with my dignity and my established funds intact. Junho admired her strength. She was negotiating not for wealth, but for her sovereignty. He found the coldness of her second term, the no sexual intimacy clause, strangely frustrating, even though it was exactly what he needed. "Agreed, Ms. Diallo," Junho said, picking up a pen. "Let us formalize the contract." The signing took place in a law firm meeting room, a dry, sterile affair. The contract was a 20-page monstrosity. The lawyers detailed the clauses. Appropriate displays of affection, limited to hand-holding, no shared bedroom, and the explicit no intimacy clause. As Aisha signed, her finger trembled on the golden pen. She had traded her chance at romantic love for unquestionable security. That evening, Aisha stood in her new palatial master suite in the mansion. The room was beautiful, decorated in tones of beige and slate, the colors of vast, quiet wealth. It felt like a magnificent, lonely hotel room. A knock. Junho entered, dressed in a soft white t-shirt and gray slacks, looking less like a CEO and more like an exhausted man. "This is your wing," he stated, his arms crossed. "The staff has been informed your privacy is absolute. This is not easy for either of us, Ms. Diallo, but we have a script. We follow the script for Ji-eun." He paused at the door. "One thing the lawyers didn't cover. Ji-eun often wakes up in the middle of the night. If she cries for you, please, just be there. She trusts you." He left, the click of the door sealing her into the largest, emptiest room of her life. The morning ritual became an agonizing ballet of distance. The vast table forced a physical chasm between them. Junho ate his silent breakfast, his cold water eyes scanning financial reports. When Ji-eun arrived, the performance began. Junho would try to interact, but Ji-eun always reached for Aisha. One morning, Ji-eun began to fuss, and Junho instinctively reached for a tablet. Aisha placed her hand over his, gently stopping him. The contact sent a brief, unprofessional jolt through Junho's arm. "She needs contact." "Mr. Lee," Aisha said softly. Aisha picked up the baby, who immediately quieted, burying her face into Aisha's neck. Aisha began a simple African nursery rhyme, humming the strange melodic tune. Junho watched transfixed. He wasn't paying for a wife. He was paying for the warmth and life she brought into his sterile existence. He hated how much he began to look forward to this tense, beautiful breakfast. 3 weeks later, the cold professionalism shattered. Ji-eun woke with a high fever. Junho, stripped of his composure, panicked. Aisha was already at the bedside, her movements decisive and calm. She had a bowl of tepid water and a cloth sponging the baby's skin. "She needs to cool down," Aisha said firmly. Junho stood frozen, watching her expertise, realizing his money was utterly useless. Only her simple, loving competence mattered. As the hours passed, Junho stayed, a silent, anxious pillar in the doorway. When Ji-eun finally settled, Aisha sank back, exhausted. Junho moved, holding out a glass of cold water. Their fingers brushed, a spark of contact that sent a strange electric current through them both. "She just needs the presence of a mother," Aisha whispered. Junho sat down on the edge of the bed, a dangerous, intimate proximity. "And you are that, Aisha, more than anyone I've known." He used her first name, not consciously, but out of sheer, overwhelming respect and relief. It was the first time she saw the man beneath the CEO's armor. They left the room together, the unacknowledged tension of their shared night humming between them. When they reached her doors, Aisha stopped. Junho lifted a hand, his thumb brushing the damp hair at her temple. The simple, hesitant touch sent a deep shiver down Aisha's spine. Junho's hand moved from Aisha's temple, cupping her cheek, his touch surprisingly soft. His eyes, usually sharp and guarded, were dark and questioning. He leaned in, slow, giving her every opportunity to retreat. Aisha did not retreat. She rose slightly on her toes, closing her eyes as their lips met. The kiss was not a hesitant formality. It was a desperate, immediate conflagration, fueled by weeks of forced discipline. Junho pulled her body tight against his arms caging her, his control instantly snapping under the weight of his own sudden, undeniable desire. The cold CEO was gone, replaced by a man finally liberated from the constraints of his guilt and his lineage. Aisha responded with an equal, consuming fervor, her small, passionate sighs a profound counterpoint to the silence of the immense, cold mansion. They stumbled backward, not toward her suite, that cold, impersonal space, but toward the nearest wall, their bodies pressing together in the forgotten service stairwell. The contract screamed in her mind. Section 5.2, no sexual intimacy. But the raw, physical truth of his touch drowned out the lawyer's sterile words. His kisses were demanding, moving from urgent hunger to deep, possessive intimacy. Aisha ran her hands over his chest, feeling the taut muscle beneath the thin shirt, acknowledging the powerful man she knew existed beneath the tailored suit. It was a release of all the pressure, the unspoken tension, and the forbidden glances that had tormented them both. Junho pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, which were wide, dark, and swimming with desire. "Aisha," he rasped, her name sounding like a vow and a confession all at once. "I don't care about the rules. I care about this." He lifted her into his arms. She instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face into his neck. inhaling the clean, expensive scent of him, a scent that now mingled with the faint fragrance of her own shea butter and the dusty air of their secret sanctuary. The journey to her suite was quick, desperate, and silent, a chaotic scramble of whispered promises and fumbling hands. They barely made it inside the door before they were tearing at each other's clothes, shedding the uniforms of their professional lives. The green dress fell to the slate floor, a pool of vibrant color quickly forgotten. Junho hadn't slept. He'd spent the pre-dawn hours in his private study, the cold air conditioning doing little to quell the heat radiating from his body. The residual memory of Aisha's mouth, and the frantic, undeniable press of her body against his. The CEO in him screamed in silent panic. Breach of contract. Irresponsible. Exposure. He had behaved like a desperate, reckless teenager. He walked the perimeter of the room, running his thumb over his bottom lip, tasting the fire. He was supposed to be the man of logic, the master of control. Instead, he had been exposed as a man consumed by a simple, terrifying need. He hated how much he wanted to repeat the violation. Aisha arrived at the breakfast nook 10 minutes late, an act of calculated self-preservation. She wore a high-necked blouse, the fabric feeling like a fragile shield. Junho was already seated, shielded behind the financial report. The air in the room was so thick with unspoken desire and shame that the sound of Ji-eun cooing from her high chair was the only normal thing. Aisha sat down, her gaze locked on her plate. "Good morning, Mr. Lee." Her voice was steady, perhaps too steady. Junho lowered the paper just enough to reveal his tight, shadowed jaw. "Ms. Diallo." His voice was rougher. "About last night, that was a momentary lapse in judgment, an unfortunate breach of the contract due to stress." Aisha felt the words like a bucket of ice water, but she knew he was right. They had to rebuild the walls, or their entire world, and Ji-eun's stability would collapse. Her pride demanded she match his coldness. "I agree," she said, picking up her chopsticks with deliberate precision. "It was entirely unprofessional. It won't happen again. The terms of Section 5.2 remain fully in force." She met his gaze, holding it fiercely until he gave a curt, regretful nod. The lie had been established. The fire, however, had merely been contained, not extinguished. Junho couldn't maintain the charade. His solution was a one-line text message. "The library, 1 a.m. code blue." Aisha found him waiting for her. Not in the stately library, but in the small, dusty service stairwell, a forgotten space connecting the east and west wings of the immense house. He stepped out of the shadows and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a fierce, controlled desperation. "I can't pretend it didn't happen," he confessed, his voice a low, ragged whisper. "The contract is for the world, Aisha. But you and I, we are outside of it." Their life became a series of stolen moments. A quick, urgent embrace behind dusty shelves, sharing a bottle of wine on the moonlit rooftop terrace, whispering about their dreams and fears. The city lights below them a cold, uncaring audience. Their hands brushing across the kitchen countertop at 3 a.m. A spark of intimacy more thrilling than any public date. Their public life became a masterpiece of deception. At a stiff family dinner, Junho's mother openly criticized Aisha, emphasizing the importance of proper Korean lineage. Aisha felt the cold knot of scrutiny tighten in her chest. Before she could form a reply, Junho reached under the table, finding her hand and gripping it tightly, his silent strength a lifeline. "Ji-eun is thriving." "Mother," Junho declared, his voice calm but firm, "and Aisha is my wife. She has brought more light into this house than anyone could have hoped for. Our family is exactly as it should be." He didn't just defend her. He claimed her. Later in their stairwell sanctuary, Aisha threw her arms around him, her emotions overwhelming. "Why did you do that? You risked everything." "Because the contract is a lie, Aisha. You are the truth, and I want more than a secret. I want a real future with you." The passion that followed was no longer reckless. It was a deeply felt, committed intimacy, a final, complete breach of their contract. Weeks later, Aisha sat in a private clinic. The subtle physical changes, the overwhelming fatigue, the sharp pangs of nausea were undeniable. The doctor's words were a dizzying blend of terror and elation. Ms. Diallo, congratulations. You are about 8 weeks pregnant. A child. Not a contract child, but theirs. A testament to their illicit, burning love. She touched her flat stomach. The contract was officially, irrevocably shattered. Aisha found Junho in his study, her hand clutching the ultrasound photo. I'm pregnant, Junho. He stared at the blurry confirmation of a life he never planned. The CEO calculated the disaster. The man only felt soaring joy. He pulled her into a possessive embrace. Ours? This is ours? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, Aisha whispered. But Junho, the contract. Your parents... He pulled back, his eyes alight with resolve. To hell with the contract. To hell with my parents. I will end the contract and marry you for real. We will face them together. Their moment of joy was cut short. A clamor erupted in the foyer. Then she appeared, Yoonhee, Ji-eun's biological mother, hardened by time, calculating, yet still possessing a cruel beauty. She saw Aisha, then noticed the faint swell of her body. And who is this woman? A nanny you promoted? Yoonhee sneered, her tone shifting from victim to aggressor. You think you can give my daughter a half-sister with a stranger? Aisha stepped forward, her hand dropping from her belly. I am his wife, Yoonhee, and I am Ji-eun's mother. Yoonhee's voice dropped to a devastating whisper. I realize now I was mistaken to leave. I will sue you for full custody of Ji-eun Junho, and I will win. Your parents will back me. They will always choose blood over a bargain. The devastating combination of emotional blackmail and legal leverage struck Junho at his deepest fear. Losing his child. The kiss was a beautiful catastrophe. The contract was burned, but the reality of the Lee family's power remained. The morning after the passion that broke the contract, Junho didn't even have a moment to process the emotional earthquake. He was summoned. He arrived at the ancestral Lee residence moments after the sunrise had washed the sky clean, but the atmosphere inside was icy and suffocating. This was the heart of the corporate dynasty, a place where lineage and reputation were worshipped. Junho found his father, Chairman Lee, sitting like a silent, implacable judge, and his mother, Madam Park, radiating cold, surgical disapproval. Yoonhee was there too, seated demurely, expertly playing the role of the contrite, wronged wife. Junho knew instantly that they had been informed of the contract's existence and its termination. Madam Park wasted no time, her voice low and cutting. I told you this arrangement was a mistake, Junho. You made a mockery of our family's name with this contract wife. Now, you have a chance to correct your error. There is no error, Mother, Junho stated, his voice tight with suppressed anger. He still tasted Aisha's passion, and the memory gave him a fierce, fragile strength. Aisha is my wife. I am dissolving the contract and marrying her for real. Yoonhee gasped dramatically, covering her mouth. You're still defending her? After everything I've said? That foreign woman is carrying your second illegitimate child. Chairman Lee finally spoke, his deep voice carrying the unyielding weight of decades of absolute corporate power. This is not about your feelings, Junho. It is about lineage. Yoonhee is the mother of our heir. If she takes Ji-eun to court, the scandal alone will damage the company's valuation. Furthermore, a protracted custody battle involving a foreign contract wife who is already expecting. The social cost is unacceptable. Madam Park leaned forward, her eyes merciless. Yoonhee is willing to sign a prenuptial agreement entirely favorable to you. She is blood, Junho. Blood will always win against a bargain. You must divorce this Aisha, reinstate Yoonhee, and secure your daughter's future without a court battle. It is the only way to protect Ji-eun. Junho felt the immense, crushing weight of their expectations, a literal physical pressure on his chest. They weren't asking him to choose a partner. They were demanding he sacrifice love and truth for duty and reputation. He looked at Yoonhee's practiced tears and his parents' cold, unwavering logic. I won't do it, Junho finally said, standing up, his chair scraping loudly on the polished floor. I will not sacrifice the woman I love for your image. If Yoonhee sues, we will fight. Aisha and our unborn child are my family now. He knew his choice was made, but the consequences were just beginning to unfold. The family's silence was the only response, a final, chilling declaration that they considered him lost. Junho returned to the mansion that evening, exhausted but resolute. He found an encrypted email waiting for him. Not from his lawyers, but from Yoonhee. It wasn't a corporate threat. It was a devastating emotional letter, calculated manipulation at its finest. I know you think you love this new woman, Junho, but she has a life she can go back to. I don't. And if I lose Jiun, I will lose everything. The court will see her as a foreign opportunist who is now expecting your second child. They will see me as the birth mother who suffered a temporary lapse. I will win, and your son will hate you for dragging him through this mess. Let her go, and let us be a family again. The message was brutal, expertly playing on his weakness, Ji-eun. He could weather his parents' anger. He could weather the corporate scandal. But he could not risk losing the only thing that mattered, his daughter. The fear was a cold, paralyzing dread. That night, Aisha called him to the stairwell. She was resolute. She will win the custody battle, Junho. I'm going to leave, he pleaded, but she was resolute, placing his hand over her stomach. You secure Ji-eun's peace for 6 months. You play the role. I will go home, deliver our son safely, and wait for your call. You will follow us. He gave her a final, desperate kiss, a vow that transcended contracts. A week later, Aisha performed her final, agonizing role. She stood in the foyer, her face a mask of polite resignation, enduring the cruel, triumphant glances of Yoon-hae and Madam Park. The agony peaked when Ji-eun was brought in. The little girl clung to Aisha, weeping. Aisha knelt, whispering her final message. Be brave, my love. Auntie Aisha will always love you. Junho stood frozen, his eyes cold and distant, a perfect, heartbreaking performance of a man accepting a necessary end. He did not look at her as she walked out. Junho walked to his study. He slammed his fist onto the desk, his voice raw. I will come for you, Aisha, he whispered. I will come for our son. Wait for me. The next 6 months will be pure psychological torment. Junho will maintain a facade with Yoon-hae while spending his nights secluded in his study, methodically crafting his escape plan, shifting funds and organizing documents. His only link was the occasional encrypted message on his burner phone. The entire world felt muted and cold, the price of his choice. And there we pause. Junho is left alone in his study, the armor of the CEO finally cracked, holding the truth of his new son and the desperate vow to reunite his family. 6 months of silent, strategic torture now stand between him and the woman he loves. What would you do? Story lovers, we have to know. What would you do at this stage? Would you risk everything, like Junho, to choose love over power? Or is the blood tie and the pressure from his family too strong to overcome? Drop a comment below and tell us your thoughts. We read every single one. Join the journey. If you're gripped by the fire contract and you want to be there for the final confrontation, the moment Junho dismantles his empire, confronts his family, and risks everything for his wife and children, then you need to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the epic conclusion of this story. And as always, tell us, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our story lovers all over the world.